decks can take it down. Beebe was on the play here. You see Polluted Delta being fetched to 19.
Yeah, here, you know, both players are basically just going to be sculpting their hands, maybe hitting a discard spell or something. In the first few turns, putting up a little resistance here and there with various removal spells and counter spells. But for the most part, the first few turns are going to be relatively unexciting. I think the most exciting thing may be a turn 3 Monastery Mentor. But, you know, you want to play Mentor on the same turn as you can play something like a Spell Pierce or a Ponder Preordain, something like that, to guarantee you get a token if your creature should resolve. So, got to keep that in mind. The game's going to go along. No need to rush things, you know.
Beebe starts with Underground Sea into Ponder. He's going to shuffle that one and pass the turn. Brier just an island. And this matchup on the deck red sheet, I think that the point for me where it seems like what the conflict was of the matchup is Beebe is a Hymn to Turok deck. Brier is an accumulated knowledge deck.
Yeah, and I mean, if you take a look back at Andrew Cuneo's win, that was at basically the height of popularity for Grixis Control, and all these Hymn to Toroks and things like that, you know, were pretty good against the previous iterations of Miracles, but those accumulated knowledge is able to basically undo all the damage of Hymn to Torok and then some as the games go super long.
Yeah, Beebe's going to crack another fetch, so now another Underground Sea. He'll Thoughtseize here, and Brier will Spell Pierce that. We've seen Miracles players main deck a couple Spell Pierce this weekend.
Yeah, and Aiden Brier has a singleton copy to protect himself in the early turns. You know, no copies of Flusterstorm in the main deck. We see that one on occasion as well, since that one's a little bit better at making sure you don't lose straight up to him to Torok in some instances.
Brier is going to cast a Ponder. There's a couple cantrips and a fetch land. He keeps that one, plays a Polluted Delta he drew off of it. Go back Beebe's way. Hymn to Turok.
Yep, that's a good one. Now, Aiden Brier, he can choose to force will this pitching a blue card or just let it hit him. And I think he's just going to let it hit him. He's got a couple planes in hand, maybe a removal spell that might not be so good. And he's fine with getting one of those hit, whereas something like force will could potentially protect him from a Jason Mind Sculptor. But Snapcaster Mage, a pretty big hit there, pretty big one for BB, since Miracles doesn't have a way to recur those from the graveyard.
Snapcaster Mage and Plains was discarded, and that was the other thing too about the Force of Will is it's possible that the blue card for the Force was just the best card in Brier's hand. Right. It being Snapcaster Mage, it seemed to be the situation.
Yeah, here comes a Baleful Strix from BB, just posturing, trying to make sure he hits his land drops here over the next few turns. Brier here, not really incentivized to do much about that Baleful Strix, but it is going to potentially block some pressure he might be able to present with a Snapcaster Mage or Monastery Mentor in a few turns. The problem with Baleful Strix in the matchup, though, it's not particularly good against either of those threats. They don't really have to attack into the Baleful Strix to accrue value, and that's really where Baleful Strix gains its true power.
Yeah, pretty anemic as a clock. It's much better as a blocker than anything else.
Oh, absolutely. Now, a lot of people have actually speculated that they think Baleful Strix is actually going to be in Modern Horizons. And I think that would be a pretty nice pickup for Modern, though maybe a little too strong for those kind of mid-rangey control decks. But you know what? Give me some more good stuff for mid-rangey control. If everyone's turn 3 in Karn and killing you on turn 2 with Infect, you know, you can give me a 2-mana 1/1 to draw a card on it. Okay.
I'm just going to let you go off. I disagree with you, Todd.
Shut up.
I'm just going to let you go off.
Wow.
Here's a back to basics. You want this one in Modern too?
No.
BB will not untap Underground Seas.
This is a huge turn for Brier. Landing that back to basics, and he even had Force of Will back up there, I believe. Now BB is basically forced to fetch up basics, so it's going to be a little bit harder to actually cast his relevant spells. And also basically just got double Stone Rain because those two Underground Seas are shut down. And BB has no way from his main deck to actually take care of that back to basics.
Yeah, powerful enchantments. Definitely a blind spot for the Grixis control deck, though BB does have some basics. You see him fetching up Swamp and Island on this turn. Mana significantly hinders, though. He's another deck that's trying to cast Jason the Mind Sculptor. Here's an efficient threat, Gurmag Angler. That one's not bad.
Yeah, Gurmag Angler is pretty huge here, but Aiden Brier's deck is very well set up to handle threats like Gurmag Angler.
And Brier has been going to work with some cantrips. You know, he fired off that Brainstorm, he found off that Ponder. The hand is pretty well sculpted. And Brier is playing my most disliked card in Legacy, the third basic Plains, as he has 2 on the battlefield here.
Yeah, I mean, that's quite a few. I think 2 for me is the maximum because that allows you to cast all of your double white cards. So the third Plains is definitely a nod to just basically never wanting to get a Tundra, but he has 1 just in case.
Ooh, 1 Tundra.
Yeah. Most lists play 2. He's opted to play the third Plains over the second Tundra.
It's working out for him for sure, though. He was our last undefeated player in the tournament.
Yeah.
Did 9-0 on day one.
Yeah, and he looks like he's pretty well set up to win game one here in this match and make his way into the top 8 with a W here.
Here is a Ponder, and he does not shuffle. He does have an uncracked Pluto Delta, though. Back to basics, going to keep those underground seas in check.
Now, here's the thing. The control matchups are very regularly about who's able to spend the most mana over the course of a game. And if back to basics here is kind of clocking, kind of keeping Beebe shut down, he's going to need Brier's going to need something to clean up the Gurmag Angler, but if he's able to do that, the game should be all but over.
So there was an attack for 6. Brier went to 12, though Terminus is miracled. Beebe tries to fight with Force of Will. Brier catches that with his own. And now Beebe is just in a world of trouble. Second Gurmag Angler. That's a good one.
You know, that's how Ross Merrim beat me this week on Versus Live with this Grixis control deck. The deck only plays 2 copies of Gurmag Angler most of the time, and Ross Merrim drew 1 or 2 every game that we played and was able to leverage that, along with all that disruption, to close games against the Grixis Arclight Phoenix deck I was playing. Here, though, Aiden Brier's deck is pretty well set up to beat a 5-5. So Terminus takes down the first one as well as that Strix, and Council Judgment takes care of the second one. And Beebe's out of gas.
Yeah, now we're just at draw go. This heavily favors Brier, you have to figure.
Yeah, not only does he just have more mana to work with, but like he hasn't, burned too much with those Force of Wills. Like he got a 2-for-1 off of a Terminus, and here this counterbalance might lock Beebe out of casting his 1-mana cards.
Very regularly does, and just another piece of the puzzle. Beebe just falling further behind as the game progresses.
Yeah, you're really seeing the strength here of Miracles, but he's not out of the woods yet. But wow,
yeah,
a blind flip on the counterbalance, that's just dirty. Decides to tick up with a Jace the Mind Sculptor. That's a show of strength if I've seen one.
Yeah, so there was a brainstorm response to that. That was caught by the balance. Jace is just going to go to work. 5 loyalty here. Light on cards in hand, but Brier's just so far ahead. It's hard to conceive of him losing this game. He's going to keep plussing that Jace.
Yeah, the first plus was to potentially get it out of lightning bolt range. The second plus is effectively there to gain control of the draw step from Beebe.
There's a Snapcaster Mage. Brier's going to respond to that with a Brainstorm. Accumulated Knowledge put on top. Counterbalance will use that to counter the Snapcaster.
Yeah, and this game is all but over, and Beebe sees the writing on the wall, picks him up.
Aiden Brier, 1-0 in this match, going into game number 2 here.
Yeah, that was a pretty impressive submission hold by Aiden Brier there. You can really see the strength of back to basics and why they build their deck in such a way where they can play 7, 8, 9, even 10 basics in this version alongside that powerful enchantment.
Right, so Beebe knows kind of what's up, maybe can manage his basic land situation better in the sideboard games, as well as get some of these removal spells out of his deck. So if you can check out the sideboards in the Cardboard Live expansion, I'm going to read off Beebe's sideboard here. We'll talk about what he wants to do in this matchup. He has an Engineered Explosives, a Nihil Spellbomb, a Pithing Needle, 2 Blood Moons, 2 Flusterstorms, a Pyroblast, a Red Elemental Blast, 2 Surgical Extraction, a Liliana the Last Hope, a Dreadbore, a Marsh Casualties, and a Toxic Deluge.
Yeah, so you have to be careful here. Grixis Control can side out most or all of their removal spells, but there's a chance if you do that, something as innocuous as a turn 3 Monastery Mentor might be enough to steal the game from you. It's kind of like the classic standard battle right now between Thief of Sanity and every deck that wants to side out all of the removal spells, It's kind of like that catch-22. If you side out your removal spells, you lose your Thief of Sanity, but if your opponent never casts a Thief of Sanity, you have a bunch of dead removal spells rotting in your hand. And the Monastery Mentors play a dual role of that, plus also punishing combo decks and allowing you to kill them quickly on the back of your disruption. So it's a really tough guessing game from Beebe. I'm curious to see how he sideboards here. I'm not quite sure how I would sideboard. I know some things like Pyroblast, Red Elemental Blast, these are pretty obvious. They take care of Jace. They counterbalance as well as destroy back to basics, and they help you win counterspell battles too. Things like Force of Will, you may want them, but as the games go along, Card economy at a negative is never good, but fighting over a Jace the Mind Sculptor or something like that is pretty important. So I expect both players actually to keep it in Force Will just because of how strong Jace the Mind Sculptor is.
Yeah, there's 2 cards specifically I want to ask about in Beebe's sideboard. The first is Liliana the Last Hope. Now, it's not going to do anything really relevantly in terms of eliminating threats. You know, there's some stuff in Miracles you can catch sometimes, but do you think that Liliana is just good enough as a threat in a matchup like this?
I mean, it's possible. They don't have a ton of ways to answer it, but Council's Judgment is a good way for them to do exactly that. And it doesn't take care of their best threat in Monastery Mentor. So I would probably bring it in, but I wouldn't be super excited about it, and I would definitely not build my entire game plan around it.
The other card is Engineered Explosives. It's a little inefficient, but it's flexible. It's your only way to deal with the counterbalance on the table, realistically. It can answer a Mentor in a pinch. Do you like that one at all?
I mean, that's one of those cards where if you have the fear, you're going to bring in an Engineered Explosives to make sure that you don't lose to a thing, as opposed to playing to win. You're playing not to lose. Most of the time, Engineered Explosives is going to be a poor draw, an inefficient cast, and most of the time it's not going to do a whole lot. And there's a chance if you played early, it ends up doing nothing because your opponent hits it with a Council's Judgment before actually casting the marquee card that you're trying to destroy.
Players going to work here in game number 2. Brier has fired off Preordained on the first turn. Beebe did start with a Thoughtseize. Saw a hand with a Source of Plowshares, the first accumulated knowledge. It's a Brainstorm hanging out in there. Basic Plains is a second land for him. We'll go back Beebe's way. Here's a Brainstorm.
Interesting note that he actually took Ponder over Brainstorm. It's possible that because Aiden might not have like a fetch land or something, that Brainstorm is a little less potent than it would be in a pre-board game where he could shuffle away stuff like Terminus.
So Beebe does have an uncracked fetch land here. We'll see how he feels about the entire range of cards. If he wants to draw any of those. He's going to shuffle on the upkeep. You regularly see that happening, so you have your lands untapped. It's free to do in the Legacy format, just because your lands enter untapped. Whereas in Modern, you might have to shock to do something like this.
Right. Now Beebe, afraid of back to basics here, going to fetch up a basic Swamp. Continue, I would guess, to fetch up basics after that Underground Sea.
Definitely makes sense. Beebe will draw for turn here.
Looks like a Hymn to Torok coming down. Let's see if Aiden has something like a Spell Piercer Flush Storm to protect from this. If not, it's going to be a clean 2-for-1.
One of the cards he picked up after that Thoughtseize, there's a Monastery Mentor in the hand.
Yeah, I mean, his hand looks quite good. Unfortunately, he did play that Plains instead of Tundra, so he's unable to cast a Spell Pierce should he draw one, but trying to play around Blood Moon, I suppose. Not quite sure.
He's going to respond to Brainstorm, cover his best cards from this Hymn to Turok, though it will resolve and take 2 of them anyway.
Yeah, and he's almost assuredly just going to protect Monastery Mentor here, and if I had to guess, he's going to probably just cast on the following turn and hope for the best. If he ever gets to untap with it, he's probably in good shape, and the odds of Beebe having a lot of removal in his hand after sideboard is pretty low.
Tundra and Ponder hit the bin. Go back Brier's way. Basic Island to Monastery Mentor.
Now, if Beebe has a Force Will here, he might have to fire it off, but looks like he's just going to let it resolve and go to untap.
Yeah, that one is on the table. You got to do something about that one quickly. It does not take much for that card to take over a game. We know that Brier has an accumulated knowledge hanging out somewhere. You know, it doesn't generate the most momentum immediately, but it gets him going. It's like Beebe's going to crack a fetch land, and here's another fetch land.
It feels like a Jace the Mind Sculptor being cast if I had to guess, and almost surely just going to minus on that Monastery Mentor. If you look, Aiden Brier's hand doesn't have Force of Will at the ready, and doesn't play stuff like Daze to protect from this type of thing. So this Jace the Mind Sculptor going to stick, and then Aiden's got to figure out a way to get it off the battlefield.
Yeah, so here is Jace. It will bounce the Mentor. Head back Brier's way. The floor of what he can do is just recommit the Mentor.
Yeah, and that's not a bad place to start. And if he has like a blue cantrip spell that costs 1 mana, he could have made a token as well, which eventually will threaten that Jace. Wow, what a draw. Lightning Bolt off the top for Beebe. And now...
Okay, yeah, this is interesting. So he hangs on to that. He's going to bounce the Mentor again, and he casts Liliana the Last Hope. And now he's in a situation where if you can use the Lightning Bolt next turn, the Liliana can actually take care of any Monk token that Brier makes in response.
Right. I really like that play from him. So He like basically buys himself another turn, but gonna go for a bolt on the Monastery Mentor. And again, this was like Aiden's entire plan, and this Jason Mind Sculptor really gummed that plan up, and Beebe now has to just, ride these two Planeswalkers to victory effectively.
Yeah, Beebe ahead on the table, was a little bit behind on cards in hand, so you see him brainstorm with the Jace. Won't take long to catch up there. Plus on the Liliana.
One cool thing about Liliana the Last Hope and decks that play Brainstorm is that you can occasionally reset the top 2 cards of your deck if they're bad. You can Brainstorm with Jace, put 2 back on top, and then minus with Liliana. And even though you might not have a creature to get back, you get yourself a fresh draw next turn, a fresh look at something that might be able to dig you out.
Beebe fired off an Inquisition to Kozilek, saw 2 Accumulated Knowledge, a Snapcaster Mage, and a Swords to Plowshares. Pretty trivial to take a Snapcaster Mage there.
Yeah, I mean, it's just an extra copy of your best card in the graveyard, plus a 2/1 body, which can potentially attack and kill Jace.
Brier casts the first Accumulated Knowledge, plays a Windswept Teeth, and passes back.
Yeah, but with a hand that just had Swords to Plowshares, a land, and an unknown, I can't quite tell what it is, maybe a second Accumulated Knowledge, he's still facing down 2 Planeswalkers. It's going to be an uphill battle.
Yeah, the white card in hand is Swords to Plowshares, not really doing too much against 2 Planeswalkers. Beebe did shuffle away with the fetch land after he completed that brainstorm with the Jace the Mind Sculptor. Now he's going to start plussing on the Jace, really going to work. The Liliana is now up to 6 loyalty, putting on a lot of pressure with these Planeswalkers.
You saw Aiden actually peek at the top card. There's a little mini game sometimes that happens when you play against a Jace the Mind Sculptor. Your opponent plus 2s looks at the top card of your deck. If you have a fetch land in play, you're highly incentivized to leave that card there in hopes that your opponent cracks their fetch land, because you want them to burn the fetch land no matter what. But if you leave it on top and it's a good card, they may just call your bluff.
Him to Turok from Beebe hits 2 Swords to Plowshares. Brier's at no cards in hand, getting plussed by the Jace. Liliana's to 7. Beebe kept it on top. Brier's going to shuffle it away with a fetch land, but
he didn't look that time.
Yeah.
Now, Beebe might have actually got him there because that fetch land was on the battlefield. He just snap left it on top, a show of confidence. And Aiden snap fetched and snap concedes here in the face of that ultimate Liliana as well as a Jace the Mind Sculptor.
Yeah, too much to come back from there. These players are going to go to game number 3. Really grinding matchup, and you did see that Brier had a couple Accumulated Knowledge there, but they came online after the Planeswalkers. Beebe had a Flusterstorm for the second copy as well.
Yeah, you got to always remember the first Accumulated Knowledge is awful.
Yes.
2 mana draw card is not a magic card. The second copy, 2 mana draw 2 cards, is nuts. 2 mana draw 3 cards is busted, probably banned in every format. 2 mana draw 4 is you're playing Uno. So in this particular instance, you see Brier unable to leverage that extra card from Accumulated Knowledge. Got hit with multiple copies of him to Turok and just got buried by a turn 4 Jace the Mind Sculptor, which tempoed him out basically with that Monastery Mentor. Never had a way to generate a token alongside that Monastery Mentor, and eventually just got hit with a bolt. That was all she wrote.
I'd like to see an Accumulated Knowledge altered to be the Uno draw 4. That'd be a nice one.
There are a few things in Magic I like more than casting Intuition to go get 3 copies of Accumulated Knowledge. But I think Intuition going to get 3 copies of Arclight Phoenix might beat it.
Ooh.
You got to put one in your hand, but if you got 4 Faithless Looting, 4 Careful Study, I think you'll be okay.
And you don't go down a card like you do with Buried Alive?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, the one card is an Arclight Phoenix in hand, though. It's not.
Hey, it's for your Faithless Looting, you know?
Yeah. All right, both players here content with their 7. Miracles here are going to be on the play for Aiden Brier.
Fetch lands on both sides. Floodstrand versus Polluted Delta.
Looks like Aiden actually has that really powerful back to basics. I'm curious if he just tries to fire that off on 3 into the face of something like Pyroblast from Beebe. Yeah. Probably want to wait just because you want to see if your opponent taps out at some point, see if the shields go down. But for the most part, you just want to hit your land drops and then try to find the right spot to land your big threats.
In the first 2 games, we saw Beebe commit non-basic lands to the battlefield. The Grixis control deck does play 2 island, 2 swamp. Beebe's on no mountains, right. So that's a little bit of a weak point. He gets back to basics.
Right, but if your one fetch of a volcanic island is a Pyroblast to destroy the back to basics, that's fine. And you don't have that many red cards, so just consider all of your volcanic islands Lotus Petals, and just play normal Magic. Fetch islands, with your fetch lands, fetch swamps, and hope for the best.
And Brier is just going to commit the back to basics. Beebe shrugs, that's fine. Plays a second basic swamp and casts Hymn to Turok in his turn.
Yeah, back to basics is quite good and may end up having a pretty drastic long-term effect on the outcome of this game, because Beebe eventually will draw some lands that are non-basic, and he'll maybe draw a red card.
Hymn to Turok hits Snapcaster Mage Flusterstorm, and Brier does have a second back to basics in hand. Probably a little upset he didn't discard that, but he has a nice one. Monastery Mentor is his play.
Yep, Monastery Mentor in play now for Aiden Brier, but no follow-up land and 1-mana cantrip, so still no token, and let's see if Beebe has an answer.
Ooh.
It's like Colligan's command here. That's going to be a rough one. Mentor goes down, probably going to discard that extra copy of Back to Basics.
Yep, that is how it goes down, but that's a huge win for Beebe that there wasn't the Force of Will, just because that automatically gets you out of shock range.
Wow, a really strong draw with Accumulated Knowledge number 2, but Beebe has the answer with a Force of Will, and he's going to fetch up an island to cast that. The Volcanic Island, of course, will not untap, but Beebe is in the driver's seat right now.
Yeah, in a really good position here. Now has an island and 2 swamps. And, with fetch lands, he has a second island in his deck. He could still, this turn, potentially cast a Jace the Mind Sculptor. Even a non-basic land gives him mana for a turn. It's going to be Baleful Strix, much less exciting, but he'll draw a card there. Plays Underground Sea. And here's a discard spell. Sees Counterbalance Council's Judgment off of his Inquisition. Takes the counterbalance. That much makes sense. Yeah,
that card can run away with the game if it gets a lucky draw, but if Aiden gets the ball rolling, he could really punish you for letting him keep that. And even though Council's Judgment can take care of a Jace the Mind Sculptor or a Liliana the Last Hope, it's important not to let that cloud your judgment.
There's a Ponder for Brier. He draws Island and plays it, and one of the 3 cards was the 3rd Accumulated Knowledge. I'm pretty sure he keeps that regardless what the other 2 cards are.
Yeah, I 100% agree. He also kept it on top so it can't get hit with a discard because he was short on blue. So he kept the Island. Next turn he's going to draw the Accumulated Knowledge, cast it to draw 3 cards, and hopefully for him able to draw out of this mess. Even though he's got back to basics online, Alexander Beebe able to fetch up a couple of basics himself, as well as not drawing too many of those non-basics.
Yeah, Beebe has now got that second island, and here's Accumulated Knowledge for 3 from Brier. That resolves.
Yeah, a really good draw there.
But Hymn to Turok on the way back.
Hymn to Turok could potentially undo that extra card advantage. You're seeing basically this grindy battle these 2 players are going through, and Brier's going to try to protect his 2 best cards here. Let's see what he decides to keep in hand.
Let's see, Brainstorm a response, and now it's a 6-card hand before he puts 2 back that has 3 lands in it.
Yeah, it looks like his hand is Mentor, Brainstorm, 3 lands, and a card that I'm unsure of.
I believe Council's Judgment.
Yeah, I mean, it's possible he just wants to make sure he gets to keep Monastery Mentor and Council's Judgment, because Mentor is your best threat, and Council's Judgment can answer a Planeswalker. But Brainstorm Mentor is also fine. Just make sure you get to do both those things in the next 2 turns. And with a fetch land in hand, as long as you get to keep the fetch land, you can shuffle away some dead ones.
Yeah, so the Mentor and the Brainstorm were hid. The fetch land and the Council's Judgment
Those
were discarded. Yeah, just hangs on to 2 basic islands right now.
Yeah, and now Brier's going to need to draw a fetch land off of that Brainstorm if he wants to, wow, just max punish for not keeping that Council's Judgment. And a Jace the Mind Sculptor Plus even gets rid of the card on top, which I'm sure was a Monastery Mentor.
Oh, looks like it was the Brainstorm. Yeah, so Brier has Mentor, but just 2 islands to pair with it.
Yeah, this is weird. I'm not sure how this is going to play out here.
Yeah, you cast that, we go back Beebe's way. What do you do with the Jace here?
I think you have to minus, but it's close. But we have a Brainstorm here first. If he misses on the Brainstorm, doesn't have an answer, he may choose to just minus on the Jace and just see what happens,
So finishes his Brainstorm, puts 2 cards back. He's going to crack a Scalding Tarn.
going to go fetch up a red source, but also just unlocking the top of his deck, putting probably a couple lands back. Now, if he found a red card like a Kolaghan's Command or Lightning Bolt, he can take care of this Monastery Mentor here. And there it is.
Lightning Bolts, and that just happens.
Yeah, and now he still has access to a Jace the Mind Sculptor activation. He's going to look at the top card to Aiden's deck, and if it's a land, it's staying on top.
And that is what happened.
If it's Swords of Plowshares, it's staying on top.
Yeah, you can plow my Baleful Strix all you want.
Now, this is a pretty aggressive attack from Beebe. I think
you turn up on a Vendilion Click.
Vendilion Click or potentially a Snapcaster Mage that Aiden wanted to guarantee he got a little bit of value on. You know, on the previous turn, you know, there was no window for him to cast Snapcaster and kill a Jace the Mind Sculptor. But at this point, I think it's all said and done.
I think Beebe has sniffed out that after that Hymn to Turok resolved, you know, he's been plussing Jace for the draw step, that Brier's hand was just bad.
Yes, yes. And he hit the Council Judgment and the fetch land, the two cards he needed to hit out of the leftover 4. And then ultimately, Brainstorm got put to the bottom with the Jace Plus. And honestly, that kind of shut the door on Aiden Brier. But he's got a Ponder here off the top. He's going to try to get out of this, but it's going to be tough sledding.
Yeah, among the Ponder, it was Brainstorm, Back to Basics, and some white card. He shuffled that away.
Yeah, the third Back to Basics in the sideboard. You don't really need that one.
And he'll Brainstorm. That's what he found after he shuffled the Ponder.
Yeah, Swords of Plowshares here is not it, but maybe a Ponder to reset the top of the library. And you can see just why people really love playing this Counterbalance Miracles deck. You know, he's really far behind, but he's not out of it yet. You know, if he finds a Council Judgment here and knocks off that Jace the Mind Sculptor, he's right back in it.
Yeah, Ponder shuffled away, though after drawing, he just has to pass back, even with 4 mana there. Beebe will attack with the Baleful Strix before plussing the Jace again. Presumably plussing the Liliana, nothing. He will do that and pass back. And Brier's got nothing. Yeah. Alexander Beebe is going to take this one down 2-1.
Yeah, not only that, though.